Welcome to Candid Conversations. I'm your host, Jonathan Youssef. At Candid, we love bringing you honest, hope-filled conversations about the Christian faith, and we would love your feedback. We've compiled a short listener survey to help us plan future episodes that you'll love. You'll find the link in the show notes. Will you take a couple of minutes to complete that today? Your voice really will help shape what's next. And today we're talking to Trevin Wax, who is a co-author of an important new book that answers core questions of the Christian faith for today's world. The book is The Gospel Way Catechism. Trevin Wax, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Candid Conversations.
Jonathan, thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Well, your publicist sent me a copy. She said, "Are you interested in this?" And I had been at a pastor's conference and had heard you, and I've read a lot of your stuff in the past, and so your name sort of popped out, and I thought, oh man, this will be good. I really want to get into this. And they sent me an advanced copy. The book's already out now, and I've been just biting off chunks of it, and I have absolutely loved what this is. I think where we need to start is the word catechism. A lot of Christians have maybe heard that word float around, but they don't know exactly what catechism is.
Yeah, it's kind of a scary word. It sounds like, it sounds like something so, it must be for the really super spiritual, educated people,
Right.
But actually, catechism it's just an ancient word for instruction. It's been an ancient tool of discipleship that has been used throughout church history as a way of basically presenting Christian truth in a question and answer format with the answers designed to be memorized so that you commit them to memory, but so that you're basically able to understand the basics of Christianity. Catechisms are actually meant to be simple, not hard.
Yeah.
So the whole point in them is to memorize something that is simple, easy to learn, easy to take with you. So even though the word may throw some people, it really is an ancient discipleship tool that is meant to make the truth accessible and memorable.
Yeah. It's elementary is kind of the word that I know is used a lot. We use it with our kids, and certainly if you come from different denominational heritages, you've had experience with it. Westminster Catechism, the Baptists have a catechism, Heidelberg Catechism. There's some of these that maybe people are familiar with. So I love the story of coming up with this idea of creating a new catechism, where this all earthed from.
Well, there are some great classic catechisms that are good for inspiration if you're looking to some of the best of the best. And you mentioned some of them already. But one of the things that really stuck out to me in the last few years of Tim Keller's life is Tim Keller was talking about how we need not just catechism, but we need counter catechesis, counter catechism. In other words, we don't just need to present the Christian, faith in a simplified form,
right,
but we need to do so in a way that actually challenges, subverts, pushes back against the catechism of the world. The messages, the slogans, the ideas and movies and music and everything else that we're being bombarded with.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to push back against some of that, because that kind of world-shaping catechism, that is happening. We've got formation happening all the time. So what the church needs is counter formation. I sat with that for a long time. My friend Thomas West, who we overlapped in some PhD seminars back in the day, he had moved to London to plant a church, and we had stayed in contact, and we had both been talking about how we really need this. He was very influenced, as was I, by the missionary theologian Leslie Newbigin.
Yeah.
So we talked about this for a number of years, and then eventually we said, okay, let's go ahead and start this. Let's work on to seeing what a counter catechism would be like, not to replace the classics, but as a supplement, as something that would be, with a little bit of that edge for today's world.
Yeah. Well, I love reading a little bit of the story, the background that where the sort of brainstorming took place is in the Kilns,
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis's home in Oxford. I mean, it's like, you're marrying, the American Timothy Keller, and here's C.S. Lewis. It's a really kind of a special story even of that coming together.
Yeah, I spent a couple of weeks as a scholar in residence at the Kilns. I was doing some teaching at Wycliffe Hall there in Oxford, and have been back several times, not to stay at the Kilns, just to visit. But I was living at the Kilns for a couple of weeks, and Thomas was in London at the time, and he came down with the train. That's the way we mapped out the 50 questions and answers. Was
Yeah.
we went through and we said, hey, what doctrines do we really need to cover? And what would be the element of each of these doctrines that would be like a not this, but that. You have heard the world say this, but the gospel says that,
Yes.
And I mean, it was a fun day in the common room there at the Kilns where, Lewis wrote some of his great apologetics works. I was pacing back and forth. Thomas taking notes on the computer. We're talking back and forth. It was really special to brainstorm the catechism in that place,
Yeah.
just because of the profound respect that we have for the apologists and the Christian teachers who have gone before us, people like C.S. Lewis.
Yeah. So the not this but that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the ideologies, and I think we can be a little naive to the reality that the world is catechizing us, right? I mean, it's message after message after message through advertisement, through movies, through television, whatever it is. Let's talk about some of those ones that are pretty prevalent, that you guys were sort of noodling on and trying to work into the book to show that the gospel actually has an anti-response to that.
Yeah, we had several that were constantly at top of mind. I mean, one of them, obviously, one of the big ones, if you're doing ministry in London or in North America somewhere, one is secularism. Obviously, the idea that this world is all there is, or that spirituality, religion is just something that's there. It's a personal practice, a personal or private thing, rather than public truth about the whole world.
Yeah.
Another one is this concept. Sociologists call it expressive individualism. It's basically summed up in slogans like, be true to yourself. The purpose of life is to look deep within yourself, to discover yourself by your deepest desires, and then express yourself to the world. That's one of the biggest ones we have in our culture.
Yeah.
There's some other ones too. I mean, worldly understandings of freedom. We've moved away from an older view of freedom that saw freedom as accepting certain limitations so that you would be free for something, and more of today's world sees freedom as the absence of all constraints,
Right.
of limitations.
Right.
We wanted to push against that. And then in some of the sections, we really wanted to go ahead and get ahead of the curve on some of the promises coming out of Silicon Valley and some of like the transhumanism type things. So, like this idea that you could extend your life forever, or that we're going to somehow solve the problem of death, and you've got immortality awaiting us in some altered human form. We obviously have to talk about creation and gender and sexuality and things like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's some of the core things that, of course, the historic confessions and creeds and catechisms address. But I love that it's got the forward thinking of modern day issues that are coming, and I love the idea. I mean, we're all wrestling with what artificial intelligence is going to look like. The idea that someone could stay alive for forever. Well, help us think biblically about what does that look like. Let's talk a little bit about the format. So, catechism is sort of typically question and answer format. You guys have gone a little bit beyond that, which I appreciate. So it's a simple question, as we kind of talked about, in an elementary kind of learning style with an answer, and then you guys give a little bit more. There's kind of some context, some scriptural references, application questions.
The main focus and what we spent the most time on were the questions and answers themselves, and we got the most input and feedback on those because, I mean, think about it. If you're writing something that people are going to commit to memory, they're going to go over. Let's say you're doing one question a week for 50 weeks. Yeah. You could spend a whole year in the catechism. You're going to be repeating that question and answer every day for 7 days or however long. So that we spent most of our time on that with getting feedback from friends. I'm a fellow for the Keller Center for Cultural Apologetics. I had a lot of friends in that group that spoke into this, some theologians, some pastors, other voices. But then we wanted to, to unpack that, because the thing about a catechism is the answer has to be super concise, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's bite sized, but it's supposed to pack a punch.
Yeah.
And then we wanted to unpack those in the commentary, not super long. Again, wanted to like avoid a ton of Christianese or,
Right.
Christian
Filler
lingo.
kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
We wanted it to be, hey, let's unpack this catechism. Let's show why it's good news. And then we really want people to apply the truth to their lives. So that's why we have a few discussion questions, reflection questions. You can either use those personally or in a group. And then scripture references to point people to, hey, where does this come from?
Right. We didn't make it up, right?
That's right. Absolutely right. And so that's the format. We also have a workbook that has a few additional questions, some notes for journaling, some scripture references that you can reflect on, and also prayers from church history that align with thematically with each of the catechism questions.
I think it's just such a helpful tool. Let me give an example. So this is question 15. You've already cited, what is freedom? Answer, true freedom is submission to God. Freedom is not casting off all restraints and pursuing whatever we want. It is embracing the right restraints and aligning our wants with God's will so we can pursue what is true and good and beautiful. And then a really helpful 5-6 paragraphs elaborating on that, reflection questions, scripture references. What were some of the things that you guys, I'm always curious in the writing process, were there things that there's little points of conflict of, wrestling something out, or a particular kind of hot button, one that came up or anything like that? Or was it all just smooth sailing with Baptist brethren?
We definitely had our back and forth. It's like, because there's some ways, even in the formation of the question,
Right.
how you form the question and how you form the answer,
Yeah.
where we would go back and forth on some things. And we also did have, quite a bit of robust dialogue, I would say, about the particular word choices or formation of some of the answers. But that's to be expected. I think it was never contentious because both of us had broadly the same vision for this project. It was really hey, how do we get this, to be the very best it can be? And so any of our back and forth was like that. I will say one of the big challenges that we face is you want to pack as much as you can into an answer.
Right.
And so to give an example for the Lord's Supper answer, which is one that I particularly love, I love the way we define the Lord's Supper, but I also love the way that each of the different names that different traditions give to the Lord's Supper. Eucharist, which comes from the word Eucharisto, which is about Thanksgiving, or the Mass, which is actually from the Latin miso, which is for sending, or the way that some see, sometimes we'll call it communion, or people talk about the Lord's table, or whatever it might be. Or breaking of the bread. You have all these names for the Lord's Supper, and we basically wanted to incorporate into a very short answer the concepts behind each of those different angles at approaching the Lord's table from. So that was a fun one to work on, because it's like you're trying to get so much in there, but then also just make it flow to where it's easy to memorize.
Well, and it's, you're bringing in different denominational heritages and that sort of thing. And so you guys have worked really hard to bring in a balance. I know you're both Southern Baptist by trade and training and all of the above, but it was an intentional, making it so that the Presbyterians, the Anglicans, could read this and actually appreciate, enjoy, and apply it to their own lives.
Yeah, we wanted it to be broadly evangelical. So, if you consider like the Baptist house is one house in the neighborhood, that's where we live.
Right.
But we love our neighbors and the other houses in the neighborhood. So we really did want this to be of use in those other houses as well.
There's a quote you had from your Gospel Coalition article that I read in reference to the book, and I had to write it down. I found it quite profound, helpful. It just sort of summarized a lot of thoughts, and I don't know whether it's connecting to everything here yet, but you wrote, secular thought swings between two extremes, elevating humans to godlike status with limitless autonomy, or reducing them to mere animals driven by instinct and self-interest. Neither vision provides lasting meaning, leaving us either crushed by the weight of self-creation or lost in a world without purpose. And I think that's the reality most Christians pick up on. I don't think Christians are intentionally trying to adopt all the cultural secularism ideologies, but I think we're swimming in the pool of it, and some of it kind of gets onto you, and it can start to form the way that you think and the way that you reason, the way that you relate to people. And I think just a quote like that is so helpful to remind us that the culture doesn't have it figured out. And never really will. You really have to get outside of mankind's own thinking. We need something from outside of us to give us truth, revelation, to show us a better way, what's true, beautiful, right, all these things. Your book is such a helpful tool in doing that. And so I guess my question coming out of all that is who's this book for? Because I'm thinking, I've got young kids, 8 to 2, and this is something I really want to go through with them. There might be some things in here that might be a little too heavy for them at times, but there's still a lot that I can unpack with kids. Is this sort of a book that you thought, across the age spectrum, for churches, for small groups, for, all the above?
So a couple of answers to that question. First, it would be a little much for kids from 8 to 10, which is why we have a simplified kids version coming next year.
Oh, there you go.
Of the Catechism. So next summer we will have that because we felt the same way. This material these truths are too important to not be teaching our kids.
Right.
So a kids version is coming next year. It'll be well illustrated. It's simplified, shorter answers. Still has a lot of that countercultural element in a way that will prepare them.
Excellent.
But we do think anyone that's like youth group and above, college students, student ministry, early Christians. The idea was, okay, this is going to be the resource that works for all adults, no matter their age group. Really, no matter where they come from in their stage of spirituality, like where they are in their walk with Christ.
Sure.
If they're brand new to the faith, we did everything we could to keep this as accessible as possible. So if somebody who's just become a believer, you were to hand this book, they would get a crash course, not only in the basics of Christianity, but as in distinction from the world that they've been living in, maybe the way of life they've had. So that it would be great for the newcomer. But then we also, like you talked about, you wind up with this stuff from the world on, sticking to you somewhere. I think the believer that's been walking with the Lord for a while would find this a really refreshing. It's not that all of the material will be new, but there will be enough of that, of sort of those countercultural elements that you may see doctrines that you already believe or understand. You may see them in a little bit of a new light. Like, how do they make me stand out in the world? Where am I maybe more compromised than I realize in how I view the world? So that's what I hope will be true of the faithful Christian who's been walking with the Lord a long time, that it will be not just a refresher in the basics of Christianity, but a fresh take on those basics, so that you may be able to see some areas in which, we've been acting in ways more worldly than we realize.
You need someone to call that out in you, because often we don't pick it up in ourselves. And a book can be a great resource to do that, for you to read it and say, oh, goodness, I think I've strayed here. I know the book's only been out a month, but have you kind of seen it implemented into churches and families and things where you're hearing positive stories and the like?
Absolutely. I mean, we were kind of blown away by the attention that people gave it before it even came out. There seemed to be quite a demand for it. As people heard about it, they were wanting to check it out. So first, before the book came out, we were excited just at the enthusiasm for a project like this. And then the requests already, can you do a kids version, which thankfully we've got, coming down the pike. But then, yeah, we've already seen, we've been in conversations and we've seen pastors in churches, Sunday school classes, small groups that are we filmed a little video last week for a Sunday school class that's going to go through this over 7 weeks instead of 50.
Right.
They're going to bunch it into 7. I mean, there's all different ways of using it. So We know of some churches where the pastors are planning on teaching through the passages that some of these answers
Yes.
are based on, so that
Oh,
they kind of take the
excellent.
whole church
Oh, that's
through a
great.
year. So there's a lot of excitement around the ways it can be used. Again, it's a tool, so we want it to be
It's a tool.
useful no matter, however the church can best benefit from it.
In the writing process, were there any things that you're kind of like, oh wow, like this is all not new, but we're kind of unearthing some things that are refreshing yourself or encouraging one another, or was there anything kind of that sort of spurred that excitement? The whole thing, of course, is exciting, but anything kind of unique or special?
Yeah, I think what just stands out to me is how relevant the Bible is to all sorts of cultural conversations that are happening. That's what stood out. So, like, for example, you read the commentary on the baptism, thing, and rather than get into the debates over baptism,
Right.
we really look at baptism and we sort of put a counterpoint to identity politics. This idea that the most important part of your identity is, your race, your sex, your, ethnicity, your, whatever it might be, to really say, no, baptism really marks you out belonging to the family of God. And that really pushes against so much of what passes for identity politics in our time. Some of the others as well, like there's elements here where it's like, oh, when we talk about the Holy Spirit or we talk about spirituality, we're contrasting that with sort of, the mindfulness apps and the routines that are out there that are all about, kind of like you controlling your spiritual life. We're wanting to provide a contrast to that, to show what real spiritual growth is, rather than, kind of the self-help stuff in the world. There's just so many layers. You get into these Christian truths and you see these teachings, and then you're like, wow, the Bible presents is so much better than what the world has to offer.
Yeah. And it's coherent, it's concise. Of course, Scripture is 66 books, and there's a lot of content, but it's not all over the place. It can be brought down into the simplicity of writing out 50 truths, and getting that across helpfully and clearly in a way that's helpful to the believer. I know you like to use this missionary-like attempt. It's, there's a sense in which you could really go through this with someone who doesn't know the gospel and say, hey, what is your worldview? Just thinking out loud, I mean, this is something that would be really helpful, I think, because often when we talk about through evangelism, it's asking good questions to get to the root of somebody's worldview and where they stand and where they're putting their hope. And this would be a great tool for the person who's a little bit like, I'm not really sure my answer to this. Read this, catechize yourself, and then go out or sit down with somebody and say, let's go through this, and I'm going to present to you the Christian worldview in a helpful way. I'm not going to get off track. We're going to stay focused and on task here.
I'm really excited that you mentioned the evangelistic possibilities of this.
Yeah.
If there is someone that's already interested in Christianity, maybe they're agnostic, but they're open, I think this book and these questions, working through these questions with someone who is open to the faith, it's going to put all the right questions on the table.
Yeah.
Eventually you're going to get to who Jesus is, why he matters, what the Bible actually teaches. If they're interested in the Bible, I mean, a lot of people these days they're listening to podcasts that are unpacking scriptures and things, even if they're not churchgoers.
Right.
There's a lot of that going on right now. I think this book, and again, like I mentioned, because we tried to make it as accessible as possible, it does avoid some of the, just the assuming that everybody understands Christian lingo.
Right.
We tried to strip that out as much as possible to really zero in on the basics in a way that anyone could understand.
Well, if you are looking for something to help you with your evangelism, with your own walk, with the walk with a friend, I want to recommend the Gospel Way Catechism, 50 Truths That Take on the World. Trevin, thank you so much for joining us on Candid Conversations.
Thank you so much for having me. An honor to be here to be able to talk about this resource, praying that God brings good fruit from it.
Thank you for joining me today. If you found this helpful, please share this episode, follow us on socials, and take just 2 minutes to fill out our listener survey. Your feedback will guide us as we create future episodes that encourage, inform, and inspire you in your walk with Christ. Just click the link, take the survey in the show notes, and we can't wait to hear from you.